Hello again and welcome to another Warlord Wednesday, the episode of the week where we talk about all things bolt action. In today's video, we are going to be doing a unit review, taking a look at the Imperial Japanese Army's most common armored fighting vehicle, the Type 95 Ha-Go light tank. In case you've not seen one of these unit reviews before, how I like to do them is I start off with an overview, going over the stats and the weapons and rules for the unit that we're looking at. We then dive into the detail, taking a look at the nitty gritty and starting to explore some of the tactics we might use with this unit. Finally, we move on to some closing thoughts and a score out of 10. And so, without further ado, let's banzai and dive right into today's episode. Let's begin with that unit overview. The Ha-Go is an armored vehicle, and as a result, you will find it under the tank section of your Armies of Imperial Japan rulebook. Like most vehicles in bolt action, it is a single model, meaning it does not come with any squad mates in its unit. It has 3 different point costs depending on its veterancy level. You can take it as inexperienced for 72 points, regular for 90 points, or veteran for 108 points. If you're new to bolt action, I recommend you take the Ha-Go as a regular. If you take it as inexperienced, you'll find its low leadership value pairs very poorly with its one-man turret rule. Don't worry, we'll get into a little bit more detail on this rule in just a moment. And due to its very light armor, taking it as a veteran is also not recommended. Typically, if someone's shooting at the Ha-Go, it's going to be with a weapon that's going to be able to penetrate its armor, and therefore the advantage of being a veteran tank is completely lost. Speaking of armor though, the Ha-Go has a damage value of 7+. This means that it is immune to all small arms fire, anything that doesn't have a penetration value. Think rifles, SMGs, light and medium machine guns. As for its own weapons, the Ha-Go comes with 1 turret-mounted light anti-tank gun, 1 turret-mounted rear-facing MMG, and 1 forward-facing hull-mounted MMG. This makes the Ha-Go surprisingly well armed, especially in comparison to other vehicles in its weight category, which typically only come with a light anti-tank gun and a coaxial medium machine gun. The Ha-Go also comes with 2 special rules. Unfortunately, both of these special rules are downgrades and disadvantages. The first one is one-man turret. It is always necessary to take an order test when issuing an advance order, even if the tank is not pinned. In addition, you can fire either the main gun or the rear mounted machine gun, but not both in the same turn. You then have low velocity light anti-tank gun. The Ha-Go main weapon counts as a light anti-tank gun, but with an armor penetration rating of +3 instead of +4. Bear in mind that when firing at long range, this means the Ha-Go will suffer an additional -1 penetration value, meaning that at long range, a Ha-Go has the same pen value as an anti-tank rifle. Therefore, the Ha-Go should primarily be considered an anti-infantry unit. But that covers the unit overview. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty detail. Let's lift up the rock and take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Type 95. One of the greatest things about the Ha-Go is how cheap it is. You can chuck one of these things in a 1,000-point standard size bolt action game and you'll barely even notice it, and you'll have loads of points left over for all the infantry you could possibly want. And considering bolt action is primarily an infantry focused game, this is a really big advantage. It's because of this that you'll tend to find that the Ha-Go, despite its relatively limited stat line, is the go-to armored fighting vehicle for a lot of Imperial Japanese players. It means that you can turn up to a game with some armor, which is really important because there is a big difference between turning up to a game about action with no armor and turning up with even something as light as the Ha-Go. It's this cheap points cost combined with the number of guns this thing is armed with that really allows the Hargo to punch well above its weight. But speaking of firepower, the primary armament of the Hargo should be considered its 2 machine guns. You're rarely going to find that light anti-tank gun, especially considering it's a low velocity one, is really worth bothering with. You shouldn't totally discount it. Occasionally you can use it to threaten a close range side shot on a medium vehicle and you might be able to do something to it, but by and large you should consider the Hargo a bully unit. It should be going down a flank against an enemy squad that's lacking any kind of AT, and it should be peppering them up with loads and loads of machine gun shots, just slamming them pins on and picking off the occasional guy. Using your Hargo in this manner is incredibly effective and really difficult for your opponent to deal with, because it almost guarantees that the Hargo is going to trade up. What I mean by that is, if your opponent doesn't go down with his unit and he allows it to get consistently hit by 10 medium machine gun shots a turn, then inevitably that squad is going to get made combat ineffective very quickly, if not completely wiped out. But if your opponent decides to go down with that squad, every turn that he does that, you're taking it out of the fight, and it could mean that you almost completely eliminate a squad from taking part in the game. Even if that squad is just a 10-man squad of regulars, the most basic bitch unit you can think of, that's still going to have taken more points of your opponent's army, typically 100 to 120 if you include a light machine gun, out of the game, whereas you've only invested in 90 points to achieve that. Or it forces your opponent to direct more valuable resources towards dealing with the Type 95. Typically, your opponent will respond by sending one of his own armored vehicles over there to deal with it. But if that's a medium tank with medium AT gun, that is a 200 point tank which is being forced to deal with a 90 point tank. Once again, making that equation very favorable for the Japanese player. But here's the thing, the Hargo is surprisingly durable thanks to its small size. You see, in bolt action, any vehicle can be surprisingly tanky because there's a whole myriad of factors that go into actually making it quite hard to land that killing shot first time. Firstly, there's all the to hit modifiers. You might just struggle to get the shot to connect. Even if you do get the shot to connect, if you roll a 1, you might not penetrate the armor. And even if you do penetrate the armor, there's a 50-50 chance on whether you knock the vehicle out anyway, thanks to the vehicle damage chart. And if you don't knock it out, the vehicle is still a threat. You can't just ignore it. But the Hargo takes this a step further because it's such a tiny tank. It can easily get 50% of its model obscured by the terrain, meaning that it will have soft cover at a minimum, and even some low stone walls will give it hard cover, making it really hard for your opponent to land that shot. And every turn that your opponent is wasting trying to kill this unit with this big vehicle is a big plus and a positive for the Japanese player. However, the Hargo is not infallible, and it does have a number of severe weaknesses. The first one is that awful low velocity anti-tank gun. Because the Type 95's AT capabilities are so minimal, it forces you to spend points elsewhere in your list to cover your AT needs. This means that whilst the Hargo's own points cost is pretty cheap, there is essentially a hidden tax that you need to pay. Even if you just cover your AT needs with some suicide anti-tank guys or an anti-tank rifle, there is still that cost that you will need to invest in if you don't want to have a big gaping hole in your army's capabilities. Another big problem with the Hargo is that one-man turret, which forces you to take an order test for doing an advance order even if you don't have any pins on you, because you just know that you're going to fail that order test at the worst possible moment. We've all been there. An enemy unit has just moved out into the open. and your Hargo is perfectly poised to scuttle out and gun them down, claiming you a kill point and taking an enemy dice out of the bag, furthering your strategic lead. But you fail the advance order, so you can't do it. Or, even worse, those really rare moments when you're actually able to get that low velocity AT gun to do something, and it can drive out and get a rear shot or a side shot on an enemy vehicle, taking it out of the fight and deleting an important asset for your opponent. But again, you fail that advance order. It's those lost opportunities that can truly cost you the game. Another quirky little problem with the Hargo is that technically it's not a tank. I mean, sure, it's got the name Type 95 Hargo light tank, but because it's only an armor value of 7+, according to the bolt action rules, it's not officially a tank. And one of the big problems with that is it means that you can't tank shock with it. And tank shocks can be really valuable in the right circumstances. One last small problem with the Hargo is that it has very limited high explosive potential. Realistically, you're going to be reliant upon those machine guns for killing the infantry. Now that's fine if you're gunning down some Russian conscripts or some early war American infantry, but the moment you start coming across veterans, you're going to be wounding the enemy on 5s, and fishing for 5s can be an exercise in futility. But that covers all of the advantages and the disadvantages of the Type 95. Now let's get into that final score and thoughts. I'm going to give the Hargo a very solid and respectable 7 out of 10. It's a brilliant little tank that's going to run around the battlefield, causing no end of problems for your opponent and probably annoying him to death. But it's also very limited. You can't expect it to get into any serious fights, and the moment that your opponent decides to deal with it, he probably is going to. But despite these limitations, I think that the Hargo is the go-to vehicle, the go-to tank for most Imperial Japanese players. And that's because it really just gives you that pinch of armor that you need, whilst allowing you to focus on the main strength of your faction, which is your Banzai and your fanatical infantry. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you Team Hargo, or do you prefer something a little bit weightier? Also, have you played against the Type 95? And if so, what did you think about it? If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. One of the biggest perks of becoming a channel member is you gain access to the Mordi and Glory Discord server. Now, primarily that is a 40k community, but we do have a small yet very strong and mighty and growing bolt action community as well. So if you want to become part of that community, make sure you sign up and do your part today. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of the latest channel members. So thank you to Binghammer, Red Queen's Ace, Matthew Foreman, VA Scrim, Drotin Ulfa, Radagast, Federico R, Mr. Burn 2, Couch Spuds, SoCal Soft, Mark Perkins, and Popping Crease. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreons as well, so big old thank you to Sven Langbeen, Captain Neverscared, Deathcore Commander, and Peter Stella. Last but certainly not least, I want to say a special, personal, heartfelt thank you to all of the top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bonbon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys for your incredibly generous support. It makes a huge difference. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.